Hi, I'm Dr. Jacob Lauritzen, and this is Read, Write, and Cite, the show where I teach you how to read, write, and cite for your college classes. I am part of a production company that makes lots of videos across lots of channels called Carpe and Zen Productions. If you're interested in what we're doing, you can check out our website at Carpe and Zen, CarpeAndzen.com, and you can see, keep up to date on this content as well as some of the other things that we work on. We'd really appreciate you checking it out. Okay, this video is part of a series on grammar, talking about and explaining how sentences work and how they work together. There are four categories of sentences, and in this video we're talking about what is a complex sentence. So if you have questions at the end of this video, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer them. But hopefully this will make sense and we'll be good at the end. Okay, so here we go. What is a complex sentence? In the previous video, I've explained what a simple sentence is and what a compound sentence is. It's sentences are made up of clauses, which are groups of words that kind of work together to function within a sentence grammatically, right? And so a complex sentence, what distinguishes it from other kinds of sentences is that it's a sentence that includes one independent clause, which is a group of words that could be independent by itself, and it also includes at least one independent clause, one dependent clause, but it can include more than one. We're going to look at three different examples in this video. So it's going to look something like this. All right, what we have here is the structure for an independent clause, and a dependent clause is going to show up in basically three different places in a complex sentence. It's either going to show up before the subject by adding extra information to introduce the sentence. It may show up between the subject and the verb to give some extra information before the sentence continues, but after it's already introduced the subject. And it may include it somewhere later, in the middle of or after the thought has been completed. So you still have that structure that you see in an independent clause. You see the subject, the verb, and the complete thought almost always in this order. But dependent clauses, which are going to look like extra information, oftentimes separated with a comma, either before the subject, between the subject and the verb, or somewhere after the complete thought in most cases. So let's look at some examples. Here's a sentence. After going to class, the student took a nap. That'd be preferable than a student taking a nap during class, right? I hope so. Okay, so let's break this down. This is an example of a complex sentence. You've got a dependent clause followed by an independent clause, and it looks like this. The first part here, after going to class, that group of words cannot be a sentence by itself. If it was the only part of the sentence, you'd think, what happened after going to class, right? Who's involved? Because you're missing a subject, a verb, and a complete thought, you want more because it needs more. So it's dependent and it needs an independent clause to finish it. The word after is kind of the thing that initiates it because it's called a subordinating conjunction. It's the kind of word that no matter what follows it will always be dependent. So that's a clue for you there. Okay. Then the other part of the sentence is the independent clause, which is the student, that's the subject, took, that's our verb, and a nap is what the student took, that completes the thought of the sentence. So again, after going to class, the student took a nap. Okay, so in this case, we have the dependent clause before the independent clause, and it's separated here with a comma, so you can tell the break between those two clauses. All right, so we switched it up just a little bit. Same meaning, but it's just slightly differently. The student took a nap after going to class. In this case, we start with the independent clause. We have our subject, the student. We have our verb, took, and we complete that thought with a nap. But then we add extra information after going to class. That is our dependent clause. That's a group of words that isn't necessary to complete the thought, but it adds extra information to it. But because it flows, it doesn't need to be separated from the words a nap. We don't put a comma there, right? It's just not necessary to do that. Okay, so again, we start with, in this case, we start with an independent clause, and the dependent clause comes later. All right, and one more example where we stick it right in the middle. The student who had stayed up late playing Fortnite fell asleep. So the independent clause has been split. We start with the subject at the beginning, and then we have extra information in the middle, and then we get the rest of the independent clause with the verb fell, and we complete that thought with describing how the student fell asleep. And in the middle, we have the dependent clause, which is separated on both sides with a comma because it's extra, and it needs to be visually separated from the student fell asleep, which is the independent clause. And we add the information who had stayed up late playing Fortnite. So we see this is kind of how dependent clauses work with independent clauses. In this case, we're trying to talk about the student is tired. Why are they tired? Well, they probably stayed up late playing Fortnite, right? And so we can stick that information at the beginning, before the subject. We can stick it in the middle like this, or we can stick it at the end. Make sense? This is how they work together. The reason why it's important is it affects the punctuation, right? Do I need to separate it with one comma, with two commas, or no commas? And it kind of depends on where the extra information is and whether it needs to be separated from the rest. And in general, understanding where clauses start and stop is going to answer that question. Okay, so let's review. A complex sentence is a sentence that includes one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. You can have more than one. All those three spots that I mentioned, you could have extra information in all of them. I just used one in each case, but it would still meet this criteria for a complex sentence. Okay, so again, this is what it looks like. You could stick a dependent clause before your subject, in between the subject and the verb, or somewhere after or in the middle of the complete thought. But it's going to be extra, and it's probably going to be separated with a comma in many cases as necessary. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful for you to kind of explain what this concept, this complex sentence thing is, how it works with different kinds of clauses, and what this means for punctuation for you. Okay, so I really appreciate you sticking out to the end of this video. I hope this was helpful. If you still have questions, please ask me in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. But maybe one of the other videos that I have on this channel could also answer that question. So I invite you to check those out. If you found this useful, please subscribe. Again, I'm Dr. Jacob Lauritzen. This has been Read, Write, and Cite. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.